Hi YouTube. I decided to get into beekeeping to provide pollination so that our family can get more fruit and vegetables, and it sounded like a fun hobby. Also, I like wax. It's great for making like a leather preservation compound or certain types of lubricants or wood treatments or whatever. So I also don't like honey. I decided to build my own hive. There's a few exceptions. And this is because I wasn't fond of the quality of the hive components that I saw in the beekeeping store. I'm going with a 5-box, 5 medium supers Langstroth hive. It's 10 frames. I'm buying the frames because the price of the wood for the frames is very similar to the price of wood, and they seem to be made well enough. Well, actually they're made really well. I decided to go foundationless after the first box. So I transitioned eventually from a box of foundation to all foundationless eventually. So I also decided that I think I'll catch a swarm. I don't like the idea of buying bees. I want to make sure my bees are aggressive enough to defend themselves, and they need to be suited for this geographic location. So one thing I would have done differently is I wouldn't have bought my foundation frames and made them foundationless, because I think there's some places online where you can buy foundationless frames with a triangular piece in the middle. I haven't seen any video reviews on buying from those places, so I'm just not all that comfortable buying online. Buying wood online when I haven't seen the product in a video or in a review or something. So I heard about some rules for going foundationless. And I'm new to beekeeping, but I plan on following these rules to get as good results as possible. So I'll tell you the rules I've heard of. And I don't know if these are great rules, but they sounded like they're worth trying. First, when you have foundationless frames, I heard it's important to keep the box level, particularly from side to side, like in this direction, because the bees will form a plumb bob, and If it's off, if the frames aren't level, then that plumb bob it won't go from here to here. Another rule I've heard is when you're placing foundationless frames in, it's best to, or so I've heard, it's best to put them in between drawn out comb. And it shouldn't just be any drawn out comb. It's best if the comb is, well, for one, if it's capped, then it should work. If it's uncapped honeycomb and you put a foundationless frame in between, I heard that the bees will extend that uncapped honeycomb and it will be annoying. Also, so capped honeycomb or brood comb. And you just sandwich the foundationless frames in between. Now, if I was going to use a centrifuge and extract, I'd put in wires. I want to build a hive that lasts for a very long time. My idea is if it's not going to last at least 200 years, then it's probably not worth me building it. So I made these frames at my makerspace. These boxes. I used rabbits, and I think I'll put a link in the description of where I got the dimensions. I used polyurethane glue. When I can, I like to use polyurethane glue. I feel it's the strongest. It has some limitations, but I'm much more confident with polyurethane glue than with PVA. It seems everybody uses Tight Bond, but I looked on their website and they bashed polyurethane glue. But from experience, polyurethane glue is very strong, and from my experience, I found polyurethane glue to be stronger than high strength epoxy, like 7,000 PSI boat epoxy. And this is for a porous to porous connection. So, a few things about polyurethane glue. I highly recommend it. I used to see different brands of it, but lately the only brand I've seen is Gorilla Glue. In the past, I've had good experiences with other brands like Liquid Nails, Elmer's, Nano something. This Gorilla Glue doesn't say polyurethane glue, but it is. If you have a glue that, if you read in the instructions that it foams up, uses moisture in the reaction, and that's probably polyurethane glue. A lot of polyurethane glue I've seen in the past was lighter than this Gorilla Glue, and I have a feeling they just tint their glue. So, with polyurethane glue, you have to have flush pieces. If there's a significant gap, the glue won't fill that gap and be very strong. It's only really strong if the pieces are glued flush. You need to clamp your pieces together with force because this glue will expand and push your pieces out. It'll push them apart. So that could be inconvenient for some applications. For the frames, I decided that PVA was more practical, and I used Type Bond 3. So the way I clamped these boxes was, after gluing and nailing, I had some wooden pieces that I put along the edges, and this was a little bit longer. See, for the pieces that might touch glue that came out as it expanded, I taped on some wax paper. This was to prevent adhesion. And then to clamp the thing together, I used a ratcheting strap. So at the bee store, I saw hive bodies that were made with like these protrusions that at the corners that interlocked to make the joint. I didn't think that would be good with polyurethane glue because the expansion of the glue might push the wood apart and possibly crack the wood. For the handles, I made a video about this, so please see that. I cut the handles with a normal table saw blade and a very simple jig. Here's the jig I used. It was made out of scrap wood that was left over from cutting these side pieces. I plan on making a hive stand with, I think, an integrated bottom board. And I'll make it out of PVC. It's called ASIC. It's hard, dense PVC foam. And I read about some guy using this stuff in his hive and he didn't have a problem. Or I didn't read about any problems. So this is just from the bottom. The bees aren't actually going to live in it. But it glues together very well. If you've ever glued together PVC pipes, that's what the bond's like. Then I have some hardware cloth I bought at a True Value hardware store. They sold it by the foot. So this is 1/4 inch cloth, and for my screen bottom board, it's going to use this stuff and then put 1/8 inch cloth over it. So these are both galvanized, but I figured the 1/4 inch has thicker wire and it would be like a support for the 1/8 inch. I thought that would last longer. But there weren't many size options. It might be a better size than 1/8 inch. I decided I would paint all of the components of the hive except for the plastic ones. And people say that this will release volatile organic compounds and disturb the bees. When my paint is hardened and cured, that won't be an issue. That doesn't happen unless your paint is uncured. With most paints, well, the ones I'm using. So, for the inside of the hive, I'm going to paint most, or I think all of it, with tung oil. And I'm going to thin this with mineral spirits so that it penetrates fully into the wood. Now this oil is similar to linseed oil. They both contain an 18 carbon component. So this 18 carbon active component that we'll just call ALA, because I forget what the other isomer is. It comprises of about 50% of the oil in linseed oil and about more than 80% of the oil in tung oil. And with its 3 double bonds, it oxidizes at those double bonds. And this causes the oil to harden. It forms something called, I believe, linoxene. I'm also going to use polyurethane, and I'll thin it down so it penetrates deep. And the final layer won't be very thin. But I don't think I'll use polyurethane on the inside. Well, there are some components that I'll use polyurethane on the inside. I'll definitely paint this ridge right here because, and I also painted ridges, these parts here, because the frames go inside, and if the bees glue the frames down because they glue things together with propolis, then a varnished surface would be easy to pop off. Oh, I forgot to show my equipment that I got. I got this rack that goes on the side of a hive, and it holds frames. got a hive tool. For a beekeeping suit, I have a bug net that I use backpacking, but I'll just find a hat or a couple hats, and I'll just put together a beekeeping suit. I don't want to buy one, but I think the important things are to reduce the amount of openings that bees could get into the suit through, and to have thick enough materials that the bee stinger isn't long enough to go through the layers of fabric. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like me to make more videos or you want to support me, please like the video. It helps me get recognized on YouTube. It's very helpful. Please subscribe and you can comment. I'll see you later. One more thing. I mentioned that I don't like honey, so I came up with a wax extraction method. The bees will fill out my initial 10 frames of foundation comb, and then eventually that'll get old and I could remove it and replace it with foundationless. But at that point in time, I'll take these frames and I'll pop in these galvanized pieces of sheet metal that I made. And then this will go at the top of the hive during nectar flow. And so the bees will draw out their comb, and this is an experiment. Before the bees can put anything in their comb, when it's just wax, I'll take these out and try to scrape off the wax, or I could heat it up to get the wax out. So that way I can get pure wax and not get honey. But that wouldn't be in the brood part of the hive. That would just be at the very top. Please thumbs up because it means a lot to me.